Cuchulain realized Laine and Morgan were approaching, he had just looked over his shoulder with his back to them because he was taking his morning leak. She wondered if Cuchulain's hair was dusted with charcoal, or maybe he was just dirty. Because how did people in prehistoric Ireland have hair dye? She was in front of the barn, standing before Cuchulain and running her fingers through her knotted curls. Laine looked over at Morgan, who was basically jumping on Cuchulain. At first Laine rolled her eyes, but a part of her knew that she was actually Morgan herself, or that she used to be. How could she have been so desperate, she wondered. Oh well, it was laughable now. While the younger, more naive Morgan worshipped Cuchulain, Laine looked on unemotionally, seeing the younger version of herself and feeling compassion. She picked a line from one of the Italian shows she was watching with English subtitles. To all the times passion has played bad jokes on us. It said, "A tutta la volta che la passione giocato brutta scorsi." She thought about living in Italy someday, in a small rustic apartment in an old building that had rickety pipes. And that was her dream. Maybe for no other reason than because it felt right. Life is always taking us in one direction or other. We may as well be working towards something. She remembered how lost she'd been back then. When one's lost, it's easier to be taken advantage of, but it makes for a good story later on. In short, there's a lot of beauty along the detoured route. It made her realize how clever and resilient she was, in her messy way. It was cool to see the past version of herself alongside this current one, but it was also dangerous. She felt herself merging into her old self now, her heart beating to the same rhythm it had, long outgrown, like a cute summer dress that didn't quite fit right. And her eyes got that stupid look in them, and she tried to shake it from her, because she should know better now. "What did you say your name was, Cuchulain?" the warrior asked, looking at Laine and not at Morgan. "Morgan, I'm here to help you. Maeve's army has just crossed," Laine said. Laine and Max had only been talking to each other for a month, so she didn't know how she managed to fall in love.
You were burning like a summer in my heart, till you found another northern star, following a lover right out of my ocean. And I was broken, but you know what they say, time's got a good way of healing. I'm back on my feet and I'm happier than ever, like I never thought forever was you. My skies are blue, dancing kind of weather, back together like I wasn't into. Thought I was doomed, but I moved through the heartache mood. I don't care what you do.
She wondered too when Morgan would go berserk and transform into the eel, and try to zap him to get her revenge, not to mention the other animals she was to become. "Crap! I was supposed to be watching the gate," Cuchulain said. "Are you sure?" Though Cuchulain appeared full-bodied and muscular for his age, he was definitely a teenager. She was surprised to see some years taken off him, as well as some weight, though he was still a little chubby. He had a streak of black in his blonde hair, because this was the teenage version of Max. This was kind of creepy, come to think of it. That meant that in this part of the story, he was only 17, and she was in her late 20s. That was kind of like being infatuated with one of the youth from the children's home, where she used to work, and acting on it. Cuchulain wore an iron sword, bronze scabbard mounts, a bronze finger ring, an iron mirror, and a beaded collar/torque. The torque was a well-known North British type and suggested the remains of the people buried at Laine. Laine knew from her research of Modern Legend, the blog. Or was it Romanized Britain? She couldn't quite remember. Even if it had been a failed blog, it still provided useful information to her current project, she thought. Cuchulain's hair was black at the tips, however he had dyed it. He wore a chainmail collar and what looked like a long vermilion robe clung on either side of his simple cotton trousers. His head was rolled back against the barn, his eyes creased, like he was deliberating something. He had one of those long pieces of grass in between his lips, like a simple farmhand. In other words, he was hot.